Welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This is going to be a solo venture as I tackle questions on, and admittedly, the title of this is a little dramatic, but to be honest with you, I didn't know how else to kind of make it flow, but the good, the bad, and what should you do. But creatine is the topic that we're going to cover today. And again, I think it's important to lay as a foundation, especially for people who are newly following the podcast, that my goal with all parts of nutrition is not to tell you what to do, is to, for the most part, take a unbiased stance. Now, obviously, I'm a human. I research this stuff, so of course I have a stance. But I try not to convey that too heavily unless it's blatantly obvious that there's a stance that you should take. So I might lean a little heavy on sarcasm. But the point of that, all of that is this. I try to remain pretty unbiased in my stance, in my role, in my job, my profession, and to be honest, just to be true in my training and true to people is I try to take the stance that my job is to give you information about a topic as it relates to nutrition, tell you what I know about it through the lens of what it is, what the positive things that are suggested about that product, supplement, approach, whatever, what the potential downsides to that are, and then let you take that information and decide whether or not it is of any value to you to go explore further or to not, right? So to give you good information so that you can then make decisions about that thing on your own. So the topic today is creatine, which has grown in popularity significantly in the last even year. And some of that is through some research studies that came out in 2024. And so we'll talk kind of more in depth about what that is and where that came from and whether or not we should pay attention to it or not. But creatine in and of itself is not new. I can remember guys that played high school athletics whenever I was in high school, which was a while ago, taking creatine. So there were some myths that grew from that era that we're also going to talk about today. And so while the topic says the good, the bad, and what should you do, there are really some specific things that I wanted to cover, right? So creatine, for the most part, you could explore down a really, really random rabbit hole, but I want to look at three things that are usually tied to it as being beneficial. One of those is performance. Recently has gained a lot of popularity for its ability to improve cognition, particularly with TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and just overall brain health and concussions, which has obviously been highlighted a lot lately as it pertains to athletes with football. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with the mountains or with endurance? And my answer is, frankly, nothing, but cognition is one of the things that has really been sort of highlighted as this main thing to take it for. And then the third, most recent, and this comes from our comments earlier on the 2024 study, is sleep deprivation. So I want to look at those. And then I want to look at some of the myths, right? And here's where the bad part of the title comes out of it. So I get questions about, should my kids take this? There's coaches in high school in particular, and even junior high telling kids, like, this is the best thing on the planet, you need to take it. And so we get questions from parents, is this true? Should my kid take this, or will it harm them? And as a part of that question is generally, well, I've always heard in high school that it had a negative effect on my kidneys. And so I don't obviously want to sign my kid up for taking something that's going to hurt his kidneys. So should I avoid that? And then at the end of all of this, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. What you do with that is entirely up to you. I am just giving you my perspective and my take. And then you can kind of take all of this information and data and decide, should I take this thing that is touted as the next miracle supplement? So first and foremost, I think the foundational place to start is, what is creatine exactly? So creatine, if you remove the the name itself in the supplement form and you talk strictly about what creatine is, it is primarily from trying to increase the availability of phosphocreatine in the muscle. Now, that doesn't mean anything to you, or it may not mean anything to you. But the reason you may want to do that is because the more phosphocreatine you have available to you in the muscle, the better you're going to be able to do high intensity, short duration type of exercises. Think small sprints or a weightlifting set or what have you. Now, we've talked about, just to give you an idea of kind of along the same lines as what this is, we've talked a lot about the value of carbohydrates in endurance training, the value of carbohydrates in moving in the mountains. This would be similar, but for short duration bursts type of activity. Now, you may already be wondering, well, what does that have to do with brain cognition? One of the deficits that researchers have recognized over the years as to why there is cognitive dysfunction, particularly in brain injury, is because it is primarily an energy issue in the brain. Right. So it makes sense where people would think, well, if this generates energy and we know that there is some phosphocreatine in the brain, if we give more, does it then help that energy deficit that is there? And so, that's one of the reasons they would suggest that even start looking at that. So the whole idea is behind taking any creatine is you are then really maximizing your stores of your body's ability to create energy in these short burst, high intensity type of scenarios or situations. So the first thing we'll look at is performance. So the suggestion with taking creatine, the general dose on a daily amount is 5 grams per day. Now, there used to be all of these protocols about how you take a specific loading dose of 20 grams for a certain number of days, and then you take a maintenance dose of 5 grams per day from there on after. And the idea is that it's going to increase strength and power. It's going to enhance your recovery. It's going to allow you to increase your training volume. It's going to increase muscle hypertrophy, and it's going to increase cell volume. Now, I know that we went through those really quick. I know that that may not make sense to a lot of you, but in a nutshell, here is essentially what it's saying. If you take this outside source of energy, it's going to naturally increase your body's ability to do more work or increase strength and power in the moment, because now you have extra help, right? As a part of that, even when you're recovering, if you're taking this outside source, it's going to naturally increase your stores of energy. That's going to probably allow you to train again sooner. If you train again sooner, you are naturally increasing the volume of your workload. If you are increasing the volume of your workload, you are naturally going to have increased strength and what terminology they use is hypertrophy. As a byproduct, you are going to get stronger, faster, etc. So the real question here is not, does it work like that? Because if you find anything that allows you to increase volume because you are recovering faster and you can do more and you can put, that is the foundation of all strength and all endurance training. If you can increase volume, you are going to improve, assuming your program is written well. So that's not necessarily the question. The question is that true? Does creatine actually increase or improve performance? And the answer here, like all good nutrition answers, is it depends. We see mixed evidence. We see a lot of promise, but then we also see what we call non-responders, where literally people do not respond. Remember that term because we're going to revisit it later, and I'm going to make a bigger case here later as well, but I want you just to kind of put that on the shelf and remember, it depends. And so I think number one, if you want to venture out into and figure out, should you take this per performance, I'm not suggesting you do this, but the short answer, Cliff Notes version of that is you're going to have to try for yourself and you're going to have to see, do I notice anything different? Right now, moving to cognition. As we said before, the real value that they are suggesting here is that most things related to poor cognition as it relates to traumatic brain injury, because this is where all of the popularity from creatine as a supplement for cognition came from. The biggest difference between cognition and performance is the dose. Most of the research around cognition is 20 grams per day, which could be a lot. And sometimes they suggest you break that up into 5 grams over 4 times per day. Now, again, the question you've got to ask yourself is that true? Does creatine actually benefit someone in this fashion? And the answer to that is, frankly, I don't think we know. It's so new that it's exciting to see where it has the potential to do this. But it's also so new that we don't have a large enough sample size to say, oh man, absolutely, every time we see this in this population, we can tie it back and trace it back to the fact that this is the improvement. There is no question beyond a shadow of a doubt that this works in that fashion. And then you go to sleep deprivation. Now, this is new, and this example really gives you the opportunity of how you can take a spark and make it a wildfire when it doesn't deserve to be. Okay, this is a great example of all science literature as it relates to supplements and nutrition. This came out in 2024, and this research study deprived certain individuals of sleep for a prolonged period of time. If I remember right, it was 21 hours. Then they sent them and put them through a series of cognitive tests. The people in the group with creatine showed good scores on that test, and then the people with the placebo had poorer scores, right? The number one thing to look at is the dose. So the dose was very high. It was 0.35 grams per kilo of weight. To give you an idea of what that means, that's 200-pound male getting 31.8 grams of creatine. So you're talking about what amounts to about 6 times the normal dose of creatine in there, right? Now, this is where things kind of go sideways. Number one, that's one study. That's not something that has been done a lot. Number two, the number of participants in that study was 15. In fact, they specifically call out the age member and that they were all right-handed, which I just thought was funny. And so it was a group of 15 people. And so you cannot take that and say, oh, creatine improves sleep deprivation, right? We have one study of 15 people, and we can guarantee that if you were to do this multiple times over, that you're going to see the same outcome in every person in every scenario, to the point that we can say creatine was the difference maker. Now, I think the most important thing here to remember, whether you're looking at it from a performance standpoint, a cognition standpoint, or a sleep deprivation standpoint, revisit them later through the lens of, should I take this, right? We will come back to all that. When you're trying to answer the question, is this something I should take? You have to compare the reward versus the risk, right? What are the potential downsides of doing this? I hear all of the potential upsides, but if there is a risk that I may not survive taking that, then obviously it doesn't matter how great it sounds, I'm probably not going to take that supplement, right? The bad is pretty limited. In fact, when you look at the negative side effects with creatine, about the only thing that shows up with some frequency is gastric distress. You could have gas, you could have bloating, you could have stomach cramps, etc. Some people experience that with really low doses at like 5 grams. And then obviously that's going to really limit them if the reported benefit doesn't come until you get 20 grams per day. Now, question that you hear a lot is like, well, what about kidneys? I've always heard this is really bad for my kidneys. And the answer there is that we don't really have anything that says that at all. Now, I want to kind of clarify why I think that was tied to kidneys here in a little bit. The third most significant side effect that we see is weight gain, and that is true. I mean, I can tell you that just personally in working with people that when they start taking loading doses of creatine, your weight will shoot up because it does increase muscular volume. So it does increase your creatine stores in the muscle cell and will increase your retention of water. Now, as a natural byproduct of that, if all of that increased creatine really does help you recover faster, really does improve your performance, and you really start pushing things in the gym, you're probably going to have inflammation in the muscle from that as well, and that's going to draw water. So whether or not that matters depends on whether or not you care about what your weight is fluctuating. But for someone who is trying to lose weight and or trying to lose body fat and starts taking creatine, it can be quite the mental defeat to see the scale going upwards when you want it to be going downwards, and you feel like you're doing everything right to do so. So whether or not that's a disadvantage or not depends on kind of what your overall goals are. Now, going back to this kidney thing, I think if I had to guess why that started getting a negative connotation, it probably goes back to the years from when I was in high school, when people would see a rise in their blood values of creatinine, and that is different than creatine. And you have urine creatinine, blood creatinine, but when you take creatine, whether you're a meat eater or not, creatinine is a measure of how well your kidneys are filtering certain waste products in your body. If you have an increase, it could mean that your kidneys are not filtering those things. Now, we have other lab values that we can look at to say, yep, this is probably the kidneys. In other words, if you get a lab value and your creatinine is high, it doesn't necessarily mean that your kidneys are shot. It could mean that there could be some hydration issues going on or a number of other things. And so we can compare other labs like your GFR, your glomerular filtration rate, which is a measure of how well your kidneys are filtering these waste products. And you can compare that against creatinine. And if that is suffering, then yes, potentially some kidney issues. But I think where the mix-up may have happened was people would take creatine, their creatinine levels would naturally increase, and someone would say, oh, well, it's ruining your kidneys. And not necessarily, it's just filtering more out because you are taking more in. So you need to verify that, obviously, with a doctor to look at all labs. But from what we have seen, there is no real downside to, taking some of this. And so now here's what we have. We have reports in 3 different areas, some really limited, some really not, and really not a lot of side effects in there. And so now you can take that information and you can circle back to answer the question, okay, is this stuff that great? Should I be taking that? And my answer to that is, I don't know. I think that you have to try it. And this is the bigger thing. There are 2 points that I want to make here. And this is true broadly across all supplementation, across all nutrition protocols, across all whatevers. Number 1, if you take something, when people, I have learned that when people hear there is a product, a supplement, or a protocol that has advantages, their belief is they will feel that advantage. They will notice a difference and they will be able to tie that difference back to this change, this supplement, this product, in which case they would argue that was worth it. So that would be my suggestion to you. If you take it and you don't notice that product is the game changer, to me, there is not much data that is going to suggest it is worth your time, energy, etc. to take. And think logistically about this. If the dose is recommended is 20 grams per day, that's 5 grams 4 times per day. Are you the type of person that wants to lay out a schedule like that to know when you've taken it and when you've not, and this, that, and the other? So that's the first thing that I would think through. If I can't tie back the difference maker to a product, to a protocol, to whatever, then I am probably not going to waste my time, energy, and money to that. Number two, if you have not, and this is true of all supplements, period, right? So we define when is a supplement valuable. Number one, when a person cannot get enough of it from food. Number two, when there are extenuating circumstances that prevent them from getting it from food, right? You're busy and you can't get a breakfast in, so you drink a protein shake, for example, right? So this is the second point that I would make, and I would extrapolate this to kids too that are in high school, junior high, getting pushed from coaches. If you have not nailed down your nutrition basics, you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough carbohydrates for training, you're getting enough sleep, you're drinking enough water. If you have not nailed down the basics, I would spend my time, energy, emotion, and every other piece of me in making sure those are nailed before I ever touch the supplement, because I can guarantee you that those will produce a tangible and noticeable difference that you can tie back and say, these changes produced a different outcome in me. And these additional supplements will not make you feel like that if those basics are not nailed down. And so that is what I would spend my energy on. Now, one thing that is floating around in my head is that when you read some of the research and you read some of the benefits of creatine, you do find that one suggested benefit is prophylactic or is preventative, and that is with TBIs, that is with concussions. You tend to find that someone taking a daily dose is beneficial because the second impact, in other words, if you face another impact after the initial one that caused some of these, you are worse off. However, it does seem like if there is creatine already in the bloodstream, that the effects of that second impact is less than if there were none. But again, you got to ask yourself, like, well, how true is that of me? Am I playing any contact sports? Am I any sort of a professional position where I'm taking a lot of impacts that I need to consider that? So in summary, long and short of it is, I think that it's exciting to read about. I think there is some potential places that could benefit. Like if you are an athlete who does a lot of short burst type of movements, yeah, it could be really interesting to see if you throw this on and you notice the difference maker. But if you can't tie back this product or this thing to being the thing that changes thing, it's really hard to sit here and suggest that it still is worth taking. And number two, if you have not spent time really dialing in your nutrition needs and your protein needs and your meal timing and your carbohydrate needs based on training and your recovery days and a training program that increases in volume and is specific to what you want to do, and you haven't dialed in your hydration and you're not getting good sleep, if you're not doing those things, I would dump every ounce of energy that I've got into that before I ever take a supplement. So hopefully that gives you some ins, outs, and short kind of details on this supplement that, everybody seems to be talking about and I've been getting a lot of questions about. Hopefully that just gives you kind of the Cliff Notes versions and helps you make a call as to whether or not it can be helpful for you. So there you have it. It is never just a simple answer. There's always some things to kind of think through whenever you are trying to make a decision as to whether or not you want to take or do or pursue something. But I feel like it's good to view it through all of the different angles. We've actually written about this before on our website in our journal. I will post the link to that as well. And this is really more aimed at trying to answer the question, is there a place for creatine specifically in the backcountry? And then I will also link a podcast show that we did in a couple of earlier episodes. It was with Heidi and I, where we sat down and we looked at a recent study, a big study that had come out of studying folks who worked for the military and special forces and really, really active jobs, law enforcement officers, firefighters, just really sort of active type of positions where, similar type of output to the backcountry. And we looked at this. So I'll link both of those if you're still interested in diving in deeper. But, given its rise in popularity, I wanted to be sure to try to give you a longer format answer than just answering on the Friday Q&A that we do on Instagram. So hopefully it was helpful to you, and maybe there's someone else that that's interested in the topic. You could always send this to them, and we would be grateful for that. So thanks for joining us. We will be back again with a lot of new episodes this year. And as always, if there are topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to email those to us at info@v2pnutrition.com, and we'd cover them. Have a great week, everyone.